Dion Hinchcliffe here, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, covering future of work and CIO topics.
And I'm Doug Henschen, Vice President and Principal Analyst, covering data to decisions, and we're your co-hosts for episode 59 of CRTV.
That's right. As always, we're here to talk about news, trends, and innovations in enterprise technology and IT.
And in this episode, following the news, my colleague Holger, Mueller, and I will discuss recent announcements from SAP's Sapphire events held both in Orlando and Barcelona. I was in Orlando and Holger was in Barcelona.
And he was also in Paris. So after that, we'll hear from Holger from Paris on his report from the IBM Quantum Partner Forum. But first, let's get to the news.
All right. Well, the big news here at Constellation Research is that Larry Dignan, veteran journalist and formerly editor-in-chief of ZDNet, has joined us as editor-in-chief of Constellation Insights. Welcome, Larry. Talked to lots of people excited to hear this news, and they asked me, what are you going to cover as an analyst? But you actually still have the title of editor-in-chief. Tell us about your new role.
All right, so I'm editor-in-chief of Constellation Insights. We're designed to basically fill that void for B2B coverage, since it's kind of gotten hollowed out. I guess the big takeaway for Constellation Insights is I want to cover the buy side as much as the sell side. So I do want to get into those customer stories, talk to some of the people who are actually implementing this stuff, get at best practices and things like that, as well as the vendors that, the fun events we all go to.
Well, you're giving us a steady drumbeat of enterprise news coverage and analysis, so only too fitting to have you join our news segment here on CRTV. Let's start off with the obvious topic of generative AI, and you wrote some interesting articles about reality checks recently. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so if you look at, I was at the Domino Data Labs Rev4 conference this week, and also just talking to other customers, and you basically are starting to get slight hints of that disillusionment. Basically, generative AI has been, the hype factory, which tech is, usually want to do. So all the vendors, all the earnings conference calls, a lot of time is spent on generative AI in terms of putting in software, building infrastructure for it. And, from what I can tell, the only company who seems to be really benefiting from this is NVIDIA. But the actual, on the enterprise side, the CIOs and CXOs implementing this stuff, they're still on the drawing board trying to figure out what to make of it. They are they're into the idea. They definitely want the productivity gains. They're really worried about security. So security is an issue, once they put in their data, they're worried about where it goes to. They want more transparency on how these models work, which is another key topic. And then the other thing is just, is their data stuff, is their data hygiene in line enough to actually use it, right? Because they're going to take a foundational model and then build on top of it. And then there's that sort of, how much of this is public facing versus internal only. So this game is just getting started. I mean, I wouldn't even say we're out of the first inning on this.
It's interesting, Larry. So I've been having some conversations the last few months with CIOs. We had our weekly, our monthly gathering, and we asked them what they're investing in this year. It was interesting. It was all cost cutting. They weren't investing on anything except they were kind of circling around AI. And now I'm doing calls with our new incoming crop of Business Transformation 150 executives, and they're saying they're actually getting quite a bit of pressure from boards to do something. It seems like the competitive needle's been reset. We should jump into the market and use these powerful new tools before our competitors do and beat them. But they don't know what to do. I think it's for a lot of the things that you talked about, Larry. But I do see there's kind of this paralysis in that. One, there's no money around to do anything serious, yet there's a lot of pressure to do, react. So I think that we're caught in a catch-22 situation to some degree. What do you think, Doug or Larry?
Yeah, I thought that it was interesting, some of those comments from your coverage of the Domino event. Jay Zerstein of Honeywell, for example, saying they really are going to be cautious about maybe looking at the creative possibilities of it rather than things that rely on hard facts. But I think there's huge opportunity just right there, things like generating code. Lots of interesting discussion from the Microsoft event about just taking the toil out of that work, letting it, give you the head start in so many areas where there's just tedious generation of code, for example. And I think, interesting to see the slider they introduced, more creative or more precise, kind of making a virtue out of it.
They call that in GPT.
I think if you zoom out really big picture, I mean, you could replace generative AI with some other technology, but it still highlights that when it comes to technology, you're either saving money or making money. And you sort of got to balance those two out. So I think that's why the boards are looking at generative AI and said, hey, this could be a leapfrog. We could, really invest and make some, competitive headway. But then, they're also cutting costs. And I think if you rotate one direction or the other, you're kind of hosed. So I think all the CIOs are sort of in this balancing act with these new technologies where they're trying to figure out, what to do, how to make it work, and where's the money coming from. But I don't think there's no right answer other than if you steer this way, it's not good. If you steer the other way, it's also not good.
Well, the only clear signal that I've heard is when I talked to product CTOs to a person this year. They've all said that they've remarked at how GPT 3.5 and 4 have scraped all the world's knowledge about their products. So not only their own knowledge base that's out in the public, but also every forum and every message and every conversation about that product ever written. And they often can answer support cases better. So what I've heard almost universally is that they're exploring how can we use generative AI to support our products better, which of course is a cost-cutting move, but it also will improve customer retention and things like that. So that's the only clear signal I'm seeing at all.
Right.
Well, as Tom Siebel has said of this, you quoted him, Larry. We're in the first half of the first inning, so lots of experimentation going on. We're gonna be talking about this for a long time. Let's move on to metaverse. This time, is it real time? Is the real thing? Larry, again, you covered a number of news announcements this week. Why don't you recap some of those?
Yeah. So here's what's interesting. We leave generative AI, this year's prom queen, for last year's prom queen. So with metaverse, the big news is that Apple has their augmented reality headset, virtual reality headset, whatever you want to call it. And the idea is that this really expensive device is supposed to, jumpstart VR and AR and all this stuff. The whole launch is very un-Apple-like in that it's an expensive tool basically for developers that, may or may not work. It seems a little half-baked. Actually, the launch seems a little Samsung-ish to me. But then on the side, you had Lenovo, who launched their, a new headset for the enterprise focused on VR and for training and things like that. And then you had Meta, who came out with their latest Oculus headset, which, seems to be an improvement. The thing I have to wrap my head around is, these devices you wear on your head are heavy. They're big, they're clunky. So it's a little hard for me to see it working anyway.
What are we seeing with prices? I think NVIDIA was down at least below $2,000, where some of these prices have been, kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, well, the Apple headset is supposed to be expensive. And I've got a whole series on one of my coverage areas this year is immersive experiences. And Larry's got it spot on. Whatever's going to happen in terms of the next step in immersive experiences isn't here yet. And I think, it is Tim Cook's last hurrah will be the Apple headset. So I think he's pushing that a little bit harder. But Apple has a track record. They introduced Elisa before the Mac, just to get the technology out there. And they've been releasing AR toolkits and have on-phone AR augmented reality for quite some time now. So they've been making this long investment. I think Tim wants to see that, see some fruit there before he retires. And so,
I think there's two things going on here. One's the enterprise use case, where I think you can kind of get to it making sense pretty quickly with just training, remote repair, things like that. Augmented
digital twins, field service.
Right. There's a lot of use cases there. So sometimes I think we get a little screwy with the metaverse and we start thinking about the consumer stuff, where you buy the Oculus and it basically collects dust after 2 months. But But in the enterprise, it works, and Apple has a huge footprint in the enterprise. But they kind of underplay.
Here's another area where we're seeing NVIDIA laughing all the way to the bank. But
right,
we've seen their progress with their NVIDIA Omniverse. A lot of really good enterprise applications show up there, not just field service, digital twin, industrial metaverse, industrial automation, process simulation, factory floors, interactive avatars. So they seem to be fueling the fire, and of course the demand for their chips.
Yeah, if we were to put a headline on this whole conversation, it's probably just NVIDIA always wins, no matter how you slice it. NVIDIA comes out looking pretty good.
Like I said, the people who sell the picks and the shovels, those are the ones that always make money in every cycle.
Certainly that first wave out, definitely.
So speaking of picks and shovels, let's close it out and get back to this. Maybe some practical advice for enterprises on, what does a good co-pilot look like? Larry, you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so at that Rev4 conference, the Goldman Sachs CIO, Marco Argenti, who came from Amazon, incidentally, he had interesting talk where he was just kind of going through transformation, culture, and he kept talking about, basically it's going to be less about code and technology and more about mental models. And so he said his firm's thinking through generative AI and all this stuff. But he started talking about co-pilots. And the vision he put out there was, you want to take a human and a co-pilot, put it together and create something, superhuman. But he didn't get into the whole, your Microsoft co-pilot and this co-pilot and that co-pilot. He was talking about using co-pilots built on smaller models that are internally, led by internal data. And these would be very specialized co-pilots. So if you were an investment banker, you would have this one co-pilot, just pumping things out for you to know. If you were a developer, same thing. If you were a new employee and they want to speed up the apprenticeship time, you would have a co-pilot for that, right? Because you join a firm like Goldman Sachs, it takes a while to, run around the halls and meet people and then sort of get that knowledge. And, a lot of the knowledge about the firm is running around in somebody's head. But his idea was that, you're going to have smaller models, smaller use cases, smaller co-pilots that are going to be pretty, so his idea was that every persona in Goldman Sachs would have his or her, their own co-pilot. So it's kind of an interesting thought. It kind of breaks this whole thing down because we talk about co-pilots where it's like this monolithic thing. So I just thought that idea was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm seeing huge interest, a lot of talk about custom models. And of course, it's a custom model, likely a small model. I was at a Coforge event. Coforge is an Indian systems integration firm, a fast-growing firm, and heard an anecdote about one of their clients. They're working with a private equity firm to come up with a custom model so that private equity analysts could get recommendations on potential acquisition targets. So taking their years of experience with finding targets, putting that knowledge into a model and then assisting and accelerating presumably the process they go through to find acquisition targets.
And Fidelity was talking about something similar in that they want to take their internal data, put it in a model where, you have notes on every upgrade and downgrade over the last 25 years. You have notes on every CEO meeting they had with a portfolio manager. So they have all this data that they could just kind of absorb internally and, create a co-pilot that could work for a portfolio manager.
Well, and this fits in really well with, employment trends. The number one thing young workers want, Gen Z wants, is a mentor. And you can go and tell platforms like ChatGPT, mentor me like I'm Jack Welch, like you're Jack Welch, and you're going to school me, and you're going to look over my shoulder at all my work and coach me. There's just a tremendous amount of potential of putting AI right next to a worker all the time with all the outside knowledge and also all of the organization's knowledge. So I think large language models for enterprise data are the next big thing, and whoever can really do that. And we're seeing companies really focusing on that. Even outliers like Appian, their big AI strategy says we're going to plug into your data fabric and pull all that data into AI and put it to work in every corner of your organization. That's I think going to be the big trend.
Yeah,
Well, that's it for.
playing field.
I'm sorry. Final words, Larry.
I just said it's definitely an open playing field. But I think that's that enterprise data is what's going to make copilots work.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Great to have you join us, Larry. That's it for this week's news summary. Stay tuned for our analysis from SAP Sapphire announcements, and that'll be followed by Holger's report from the IBM Quantum Partner Forum in Paris. Hey folks, it's Doug Henschen with Constellation Research here with my colleague Holger Mueller. We're here to talk about SAP and Sapphire. Actually, we were at two different Sapphires. I was in Orlando, you were in Barcelona, but we're here to talk about, all the fun things that happened there in both places. So Holger, what's that?
Only 1 week apart, which is new.
Yeah.
So normally they would be longer spaced out, but this is new that they're 1 week apart. So
yeah, and they had a little practice before they got to Barcelona, so I'm sure it was even better.
Right.
Let's start talking BTP, the business technology platform. I thought there were some things to like there. I'm liking the DataSphere announcement. I think they were very keen on the open message. They partnered with Google in a pretty big way. We're going to be seeing DataSphere and BTP on Google later this year. North America in Q2, EMEA later this year. And openness was also recent announcements with IBM, with Databricks, with DataRobot. What are your thoughts on BTP?
Yeah, I mean, on the DataSphere side, right, it's good to see that SAP has realized they have to partner. They can't do this all themselves. Of course, they have to partner with the hypercloud guys, as they call them, cloud providers. But overall, last year, there was very little announcements, news at Sapphire. This year, significantly more. It really shows the pandemic has taken out productivity out of product development. But on BTP, there's a smorgasbord of things which are happening. The thing which stands out and has been underrepresented, there's a new way how to start the SAP applications, fittingly called SAP Start, with a new UI and portal with things in place, also plugging into Teams, of course, because Microsoft is the big partner, right? So a lot of things are happening, also on the integration out of the box side, on the way you can build SAP applications. SAP Build has seen its first review with its first new capabilities. So it's all a lot of work happening on the platform side, which is super important to make your applications competitive in the 21st century. And SAP has finally realized that. So it's good to see.
Yeah. I'm there mainly focused on data and analytics. So the DataSphere thing was what I spent most of my time on, in addition to sustainability, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the partnerships were good, but I thought maybe a little too much deference to the partnerships. Like they talked about DataSphere as being for SAP data, Google BigQuery for everything else. Well, no, you have to bring everything together, and I think DataSphere has to be the overarching, fabric that brings everything together to drive the AI. It's not like you can just have two separate pools of data. So it's good. The openness is great. They do have to have partnerships, but I think SAP is to be the one to bring it all together. And it felt to me like a better sort of fabric announcement than Microsoft's super all-inclusive. We'll give you everything: data integration, data lake, data warehouse, analytics, data science. We have it all. It's all under one umbrella. But it's all Microsoft. It didn't really feel open, and it felt like you have to take it all from Microsoft, which isn't true. In the end, they were also speaking openness, but I liked SAP's more practical focus.
Right, you can see a different point of perspective, right? You can see the cloud vendor who wants to do it all by themselves, lock people in, have things by them done. They can only do it by themselves. Any partnership is seen as a weakness. Whereas the independent software vendor, largest one, the ERP space of SAP, partnering with everybody who's here because customers want to have choice. So different position, different vantage point. Good to see SAP to partner, and good to see SAP not building everything themselves anymore.
Yeah, and I think enterprise customers are heterogeneous and want choice. So,
of course, need choice.
Let's move on to Green Ledger. A carbon accounting down to the transactional level, not the averages. I think this is a good progress. Hilary Maxon, the CFO of Schneider Electric, brought up a key point that I love, is that you have to have the financial data and the carbon data together. This is key. I think one of the SAP's differentiation is that they have planning capabilities woven into their they have a pretty extensive portfolio now addressing carbon issues, including this carbon footprint with planning capabilities, not just reporting on carbon after the fact, which is boring necessity. It's really being able to plan with carbon data and economic data together so you can make these decisions with an eye on the bottom line. And in many cases, customers are finding that the bottom line is improving when they make more sustainable choices. And we're seeing circumstances today where, things like packaging taxes, plastic taxes in the UK and Spain, if they're not designing their products from the start to be sustainable, they end up spending more in the end to pay for taxes that are only perceived after the fact. So thoughts on the Green Ledger and their progress there, Holger?
Yeah, we've got great points there, and I think it's such a fundamental thing. If you think about ledger, general ledger is kind of like at the heart of an ERP system on the finance side, right? And you don't want to do open heart surgery. So for me, from an architecture and functional perspectives, I'm very curious how SAP is doing this. It's going to be a parallel ledger. It's going to be the same ledger. There's so little information, or pretty much no information. There's not even a shipment date, right? You and me were on a post Sapphire sustainability call, and the team was dancing around the topic because there's no date, which doesn't look good because it was coming last year. It's supposed to come end of this year, beginning of next year. It's important to tell customers in a fundamental thing, on a high involvement thing, when that is coming. So it's going to be really interesting how SAP implements that with hopefully no performance cost for the rest of its ERP product. Yeah,
I agree. They're a little sketchy on exactly how it's going to work, but they did make the point, and I agree, that there's a lot of moving targets where sustainability and ESG requirements are concerned. We're waiting and expecting, overdue now is really an SEC announcements about requirements around reporting carbon emissions and climate risks. And that's still coming. And I think they're in a position where it's, for SAP, certainly their European customers are pushing, their US customers less so. And I think we've got an opportunity for them. They said they'd be coming back in Q3 with more details about how this green ledger would work with the conventional ledger. And I think once there are mandates from the SEC or talk, sure, it's going to be a political football, but once there's mandates really on the table in the United States, it's going to make a world of difference in demand. And that's when they really are going to have some of these details on how Green Ledger works with financial ledger really nailed down.
Yeah, well said. But what I really liked is, and maybe I'm over-interpreting in a positive way, is that SAP was ahead of the legislative requirement, right? And so they're doing the statutory and the necessary things, but offering an alternate way to look at accounting from a carbon credit, from a green ledger perspective. So maybe overestimating, over-expecting things here, but I'm hoping that that's going to happen, and that will be a true differentiator to the ERP competition. So
yeah. Again, I think they're ahead of the game for the sake of their European customers who are more under the gun. There's the EU taxonomy and other legislation actually now in place in the EU, where it's still in waiting in North America. So I think they're kind of straddling the fence right now. Let's move on to the big topic that comes up every time we have a conversation these days, and that's generative AI. Their big point was we're gonna take our process knowledge and combine it with a choice of open AI alternatives out there. What
business AI? It's business AI. It's not just AI. It's business AI. Yeah, no, I think it's good they had to do something. I think they only did the very, very, very low-hanging fruits with one of the 5 daughters. I call this different investments, daughters, sisters, actually. Success factors are always the star class pupil, first to update things. And that was, of course, all about helping to write job posts, right? Where really ChatGPT is super, super strong, super powerful. Anybody writing a job position right now manually from scratch is not taking advantage of technology. But that is the bottom, right? That's the most easy things. The rest were like, again, the kitchen sink things, find things. Oh, we're doing stuff in transportation management and so on. Then partnering with everybody, right? Partnerships with, before Sapphire, with Watson X, right? Foundational models, partnership, of course, with Microsoft. And I think the specific announcements helped Microsoft Microsoft more than SAP because they brought SAP content into the Office suite. But that's something to figure out in the long run. And then, of course, partnership with Google, right? And who knows what's going on with AWS at some point in summer.
Yeah, there was a lot of deference to their partners, both Google and Microsoft.
Yep.
We kind of pushed on them at the Analyst Summit in Orlando. I know you weren't there, Holger, but you saw some of the questions and sessions remotely. There was a lot of push. Okay, so what about generative AI is uniquely SAP? What is the governance that SAP brings to it? You know, they tried to make the point that we are the abstraction layer. We're going to broker to the different AI partners depending on the need, which is not unlike Salesforce, for example. Their idea to use different LLMs, different options for their capabilities, picking and choosing. But I think they do have to refine their messaging, really nail down what is their ethics process for evaluation and how they make sure. They did make a point, that their SAP data, customer data, is not going to go to OpenAI or another LLM. They have to articulate more how the SAP data and process knowledge plus that external LLM creates a 1 + 1 = 3. I think they didn't really, they kind of said, we're going to bring the process knowledge and the LLM together, but they didn't show how it's going to create a lot more value. They don't really have the live examples yet.
Right. It's too early, but there's one fundamental architectural component missing, right, which Salesforce has created with Genie, which puts stuff into a lakehouse, right? And you have to have this capability to store at the chip unstructured, structured data together to unleash whatever AI model you're running in the cloud, privately, your own data scientists and so on. And that's the architectural component that's still missing on the SAP side. And with that...
Well, they do have DataSphere, right? It's a distributed data layers on a
It's the federation model, right? We could finish the rest of the time debating about centralizing and federation, right? I think in AI you have to have it centralized. You copy the data, but we'll see that, right? But that's missing, right? So DataSphere is not going to be your foundation for building your AI models, right? It's too expensive to do that across the cloud, egress costs, and so on. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, that's all the time we have for now. Great catching up on SAP Sapphire both from Orlando and from Barcelona. Thanks for joining, Holger.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hello everybody, it's Holger Mueller here from Constellation Research. So, we are key takeaways from day 3 here at IBM's Quantum Partner Innovation Forum. We started with some of the IBM announcements that are happening in 2023. Stay tuned for mid-June, can't tell you much more than that about that. And then some very interesting settings in the morning about general progress in quantum in specific areas. Healthcare was, of course, first out of the chute. Next was interesting questions about ethics in quantum, what could go wrong with quantum. We have to be realistic about this for some very interesting aspects. And then very close and near to my heart, because it brings together my 2 research areas where the future is work as well, the skills challenge. And it was very interesting to see how different players in the field are trying, different countries and different research institutions are trying to bring up the right talent in quantum. Big issues from a diversity inclusion perspective, of course, like in every STEM area. But good to see, very good cross-pollination between the attendees. Then we had the chance to do a feedback session with IBM. It's good that IBM is listening. The 2 working groups picked education, not a big surprise. And also the other one, issues with the Qiskit open framework, which not surprisingly is moving very fast, and everybody who builds software wants stuff not to move fast, except for bug fixes and new features, right? So discussions we see in much more mature software areas about how much is coming in release, is it really work, do you have to do changes, does it have to work backward compatible, are there the recommendations where, let's see what IBM is doing to come up with a feature release, new capabilities, and a stability release, which is maintenance and support. So that's the interesting recommendation there. We'll see, hey, it's on record here with IBM, we'll do that. And then in the afternoon, very interesting other applications in chemical industry. We heard from a Japanese IBM quantum partner how they're using that with coupling 2-qubit machines to figure out cohesivity. And also very interesting from a German energy provider, how they're using quantum to model the risk of long-term energy contracts, which is a very interesting statistical challenge, which is being done better in quantum. And And then we closed with the Basque government, which recently signed a big deal with IBM March 17th, 2 months ago on the day, about making Basque Country the sixth pillar of locations for IBM quantum machines, which they're investing very much about it, learned a lot about the Basque Country. So overall, what I can say is, it's a great event from the sense of bringing together, like the name is a little confusing, right? Confusing the IBM Quantum Partner Forum. It's not quantum partners of IBM. Everybody's a partner. Customers, research institutions, real partners, software partners, and so on. So it's bringing together everybody around the IBM quantum ecosystem practically, right? So definitely a lot of progress. It remains hard. The big question, expectations are what's going to happen with the next quantum machines? How many of these use cases will they be able to enable? And that's personally for me the exciting, interesting thing is, will it be, like I compare it often with the PC, right? With an example, the PC right away supported both the relatively easy word processing format capabilities and the spreadsheet, which is much more demanding, in one get-go, in one version, right? With quantum, it might be that we see something which is easier to be done, let's say protein modeling, maybe, I'm making it up here, versus Monte Carlo simulation, financial planning, not. So it might be interesting, where is the quantum capability jumping over the use case demands? Will it catch all use cases? Will they kind of like run better or worse, or will some not yet run? That's, to me, is the big question in 2023 that we'll see. But overall, great event, great location in Paris. Good to see the international presence. Not just Europeans were here, lots of American institutions, lots of Canadian institutions, of course, Francophone, lots of Asian institutions out of Japan. So that was good to see. And it was a great event. I'm looking forward to the 2024 edition. Thanks for watching. This is Holger Mueller from Constellation Research.
Well, that's a wrap on episode 59 of CRTV. Get set for our next episode coming up in 2 weeks.
That's right. Watch for co-hosts Holger Mueller and Liz Miller, who will bring you episode 60. That's 60 of CRTV. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at CRTV_show, at our website, ConstellationR.com, and subscribe to Constellation Research on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Also, watch for the link below to subscribe to Larry Dignan's weekly Constellation Insights. Thanks for watching and have a great week. Headroom, we're just seeing the sliver of a picture behind you, like you're in your living room.
Yeah, well, I'm in my office. But...
They made it worse. Go the other way. Okay? We need some discipline. We can't just talk for 20 minutes.
I'm not talking 20 minutes. What are you talking about? I'm not logged in. Interesting.
Oh my Lanta. Okay.
Then go to camera. Then
where's the gear?
Virtual background.
Where's the gear?
On the bottom there's a tab. Mute, stop cam, settings, present, leave studio.
Oh, my bad. Got it. Yeah, sorry. It's hidden behind my laptop screen.
Mr.
On my
technology.
Yeah, no, it's hidden by physical technology.
There you go.
Yeah, I have blackmail material now. And what I really want to do is watch
I'm doing a Holger. I'm not knowing how to use a browser. I'm doing
It has nothing to do with that is physically hitting. And I want to watch the Europa League. Let's get this done with. It's the final.
Okay, now we're on your schedule. We're on your schedule, totally, yeah.
No, this should not be happening.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes of delay because of you, and now you got to watch a soccer game.
This is the second most important club finals, okay? And
no, he changes the subject.
Are you ready, Hannah?
And none of your audios are off like Holger's is, so I don't have to go back and edit every time he talks to move his audio now. No. Yes, it takes me so long.
Oh, we fixed that though.
We did.
We figured out that he's using the wrong browser.
I know.
It's like a hot stock though. You get bored with it, and when you still need to ride that gravy train as long as possible.
Yeah.
And don't forget to go to the one shots.
I have been going to the one shots.
Last time it was 5 minutes of talking head. I stepped on you there.
All right.
If you want to say thanks for watching and have a great week.
No, I'm not that proprietary.